Now I'm glad to start this afternoon session, and it's a pleasure to introduce David Papineau from King College London about how the many words matters. David.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Lev, and the organizers for putting this together. This is such a nice conference. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you. Okay, so the title, should I hold this? Okay. Explains what I'm going to say. It's, in fact, very simple, 3 parts. I'm going to have a little introduction. I'm going to talk about regret and relief, and then I'm going to talk about distributive justice. So, okay, the many wills interpretation is pretty weird. And despite that, I take it many people here are happy to believe it. But is it so weird as to make us live our lives differently? And the consensus amongst Everettians is, no, we can only influence the future of the branch that we're on, so who cares about other branches we can't interact with? And when we make decisions, we proceed just as before. We maximize expected utility across all the physically possible futures, just like normal people, weighted by their, doesn't matter what you call them, weighted by the same numbers as ordinary people use, and so we will end up acting in the same way. But even so, I'm going to show you that there are a couple of ways in which Everettianism does matter to the way we live our lives. One, I think I'll go quite quickly because it's not that interesting, is backwards looking, to do with regret and relief. And the other is forwards looking, and it's to do with distributive justice. And there I think Everettianism will make a real difference, should make a real difference to what actually happens in the real world in context of treating people fairly. Before I go on, I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about, okay, I want to talk about, I want to make a couple of comments about Simon and Dustin's talks this morning and frequentist ideas about probability. Yeah? Do you want me to stand still and use the microphone? Okay. Could I just use that? Okay, let's see if that works better. Shout out if it doesn't. I noticed. I mean, I said to Simon, "Why are we doing all this frequentist stuff?" And then I noticed that in my talk, I'm going to start talking about 60% of the future. One thing happens, 40% another thing happens, and I started worrying about what do I mean? And listening to the 2 talks, it struck me that I thought 2 different notions of frequency are being run together. So frequentist ideas appear in the philosophy of the foundations of probability in 2 very different ways. So one way we might call it the von Mises way, the idea that we should identify properties with long-run frequencies, the limit of the relative frequency as we go on and doing something. That's one frequentist idea. In fact, I think that's a terrible idea and doesn't go anywhere. There's a quite different idea, which you might think of as the Passian frequentist ideas, where we're thinking about a chancy situation, just once off, and there's various possible outcomes, and the physical symmetries of the situation impose a partition of equivalent events on the outcome. You know, 6-sided die, it's symmetrical, all the different dice have to have the same probability. That's a very different idea, and I think that's a very powerful idea. I take it that's what's going on in Boltzmann's derivation of the Maxwell distribution, in Maxwell's own derivation of it. I take it that's what's going on in the Deutsch-Wallace proof. I would like to think, following Dustin's talk this morning, that's what's going on in Everett. And then we get a notion of the probability of event is to do with the frequency, i.e. how many of those equiprobable outcomes constitute that event. You've got to die. How likely is it you get a number higher than 4? Well, 2 of the 6 equally probable outcomes, so it's a third. So I criticized Simon for bringing in frequencies. I thought he was talking about the first kind of frequency, von Mises' long-run frequency. But at the end, it became clear that he was thinking about something like Laplace's classical symmetry frequency. And as I say, I'm all in favor of that. I mean, after all, I take it that objective probabilities are a real feature in the world. I take it they're going to supervene on the physical aspects of the situation. And if there's symmetries there, then that's going to impose a certain number of equiprobable outcomes. Just to complete the point, the two notions of frequency aren't completely unconnected, because after all, if you start with the good notion, then you can use the probability calculus, and you get the laws of large numbers, and you know that the relative frequency will become close to the probability in the long run, probably. And that connects up the good notion of probability, the Laplacian notion, with the long run frequencies. But of course, that's a derivative notion, and the fact that the long run frequencies will correspond to probabilities, probably, I mean, we can make it precise, shows that we're working with a prior notion of probability, the Laplacian notion. So that's who we are. So the classical symmetry notion of frequency is not really so obviously frequencies. That's good. And we'll see, Dustin can talk to me afterwards about whether that's fair to what he said. Okay, so that was just, I wanted to get that off my chest. Relief and regret. So imagine you take a silly chance. You get drunk, you bet a lot of money at bad odds, and luckily your horse comes home. You win the bet, and you think, thank God for that. I mean, I nearly did something terrible, but it worked out okay. Or think about the converse. You bet a substantial amount of money at good odds. You find a good bet. The bookmaker doesn't know about the real odds, but unluckily you lose, and then you regret making the bet. If you stop to think about it, it's not clear those reactions make any Everettian sense. After all, in the first case, there's another branch of reality where your family's destitute. In fact, a bigger branch of reality. What are you so pleased about? What's there to be relieved about? You did a really bad thing. It would have been better if you hadn't. There's no relief at your silly action. Your silly action had bad consequences. And it works the other way around. I mean, here you are. I mean, you've been kicked out of your home, but on the other branch, your family's on a world cruise. What's so bad about what you did? You did the right thing. Worked out fine over there. So it's not clear regret and relief, as we normally think of them, make sense if you're Everettian. I'm not sure if this issue's in the literature. I can remember Tim putting it to me 10 years ago or so. And I think Tim intended it as a reductio of Everett. I mean, Tim thought it was obviously in these situations you should feel whichever it was, relief and regret. But if you're an Everettian, you shouldn't, so Everett must be wrong. But my immediate reaction, in fact, I'd prefigured his challenge, was to outsmart him. Philosopher's lexicon, perhaps not everybody in here knows it. Outsmarting is Jack smart. You block your opponent's reductio by embracing its conclusion. Bernard Williams argued against Jack Smart. If you're a utilitarian, it'd be okay to hang an innocent man, and Jack Smart outsmarted him by saying, yeah, sometimes it is right to hang an innocent man, okay? So I outsmart 10%, but of course it's right. If you're an Everettian, you shouldn't feel regret and relief in those cases. There are some similar Everettian attitudes, but they don't add up to relief and regret. So suppose you made the sensible bet, and then the quantum horse unlucky didn't come home. You can feel disappointed. I mean, here I am, we've branched, and I've drawn the short quantum straw. I've ended up, my family's now all destitute. Over there, they're all having the life of Riley. I mean, I can feel disappointed at what finding myself now in this branch. But that's still not the same as regret. It's not the case that I feel that I did the wrong thing, that the way reality is and has panned out to be, it would have been better if I'd done the other thing. I mean, if I hadn't made the bet, there wouldn't have been any me doing better. I mean, there'd be only one future. The person who's disappointed isn't there anymore. So I don't think within Everett you get any sense that the cases where now, orthodoxy anyway, thinks, I regret I made that decision, even though it was probabilistically irrational. In Everett, there's no good sense in which you can regret such decisions. And I think that's just true. I mean, I think Everett should make us think differently about regret and relief. Okay, let me move on to distributive justice, because that's kind of more interesting. That's to do with how we should act. And I want to show that a concern with fairness should make Everettians act differently from the way we normally act in certain circumstances. Now, I want to put one thing to one side. So I should say, this is work I've done with Thomas Rowe. He's a young colleague in London. He's a political philosopher. I heard him give a talk on these issues. In fact, he argued for what I think is the wrong view on orthodox metaphysics. And I said, no, that makes no sense what you're defending. But come to think of it, if you were an Everettian, it would make perfectly good sense. So that's what we're going to get to. Okay, now you put to one side an issue which is familiar from the literature, which is Hugh Price's, it's one of the objections to David Wallace's derivation of the Born rule. And Hugh has said, it's just a thought we had from Tim today, maybe it's come up in the conference before, that if you're an Everettian, your concern with fairness should undermine the Born rule. I'm not sure Tim would put it like this, but this is what Hugh says, because Hugh's thought is, look, after all, if all your successors are equally real, you shouldn't be sacrificing the interests of the low probability ones for those of the high probability. We should treat them all equally. Okay, not sure that I should be lumbering Tim with this particular line of argument, but okay, it's in the same ballpark. Okay, now hang on. Okay, what I'm about to say is that David says that's an argument for changing your utilities and not your probabilities, and I'm not quite clear. Okay, well, let's go ahead. I mean, it's Hugh's thought is, look, we're getting on a plane, like Tim said, and look, there's a real person who is going to crash down in horrible flames, right? And you're allowing that to happen just in order to have a nice time on the beach. Come on, I mean, you shouldn't let this person suffer just for this little bit of enjoyment. You should treat all these successors equally. Okay. David's response is, well, he can understand the impulse. Maybe this is kind of the right thought to have, but it's not an argument against the Born rule. David's thought is that, look, what's happening here is really that you're taking more seriously this thing which even on orthodoxy was always on the cards, but somehow Everett has brought home to you how horrible this thing is going to happen to on that branch of reality. So you are going to up the disutility of crashing in flames, or I mean, how much worse could it be? You're going to down the positive virtues of lying on the beach, and you're going to think more about not having this really bad thing happening, even though you keep the probability the same. And David argues that, in fact, the idea that you might, in the face of this kind of impulse, change your probability is going to lead you into incoherence. And most of the impulse can be satisfied just by changing your utilities. And perhaps you should Perhaps now we're Everettians, and we see that all these things are equally there, that we should change our utilities. And I don't think David has an argument against that, and nor do I. Yeah, I mean, look, so we tend to, I mean, some of us tend to be optimistic and assume that the bad things aren't going to happen, and maybe orthodox metaphysics makes it too easy to think like that, and maybe we should change our minds when we're Everettians. But that's not the case I want to look at. That's kind of not so interesting. I'm going to start with perfectly ordinary utilities and probabilities that are widely assumed by non-Everettians and Everettians, and I'm going to show that how in certain circumstances they'll lead, even they will lead Everettians to act differently from normality. So here's it, right? So we're doing distributive justice, and we'll look at this idealized case, but I hope you will all see that it generalizes pretty easily. So Anne and Bill, and they both have a disease causes quite a lot of pain. We're going to look at this over the course of a year. Anne's pain is worse, and let's just give it some, the numbers don't really matter, as you'll see, but let's say that Anne has 6 degrees of pain to Bill's 4. And each week, 1 dose of a drug, pain-killing drug, for the specific ailment is available. Only one of them can get it each week. So what should we do? What should we do in this situation? Well, you might think we should give it to Anne every week, because that's going to maximize the pain relief. We're going to take away 6 units of pain every week, whereas if we gave it to Bill sometimes, that week we'd only take away 4, less pain relief. But I think most people would think that was wrong. That's unfair to Bill. You know, he's suffering too. He deserves some consideration too. We should give it to Bill some of the weeks. I mean, not more weeks than Anne. In fact, we should give it to Bill fewer weeks than Anne. But maybe the right thing is to give it to him, let's say, 4 weeks for every 6 weeks Anne gets. And so then we kind of, that's the best outcome. Rather than giving it to Anne every week, that's good on pain relief, but bad on fairness. Over here, we get a better mix of pain relief and fairness. Okay, so far, I hope, so uncontentious. But now suppose we just got a once-off 1 week problem. No year over which we can spread the distribution of the drug. We just got to decide what we're going to do with the drug this week. So technical, the drug is now an indivisible good. What should we do now? Well, one thing would be give it to Anne. I mean, we can save 6 units of pain rather than 4. Isn't that the right thing? But there's some people, including my colleague Tom Rowe, who say, no, that's unfair too. We're not giving Bill any consideration. What we should do is have a lottery with 6 straws for Anne and 4 for Bill, and okay, let's make it a quantum lottery to see where we're going, and distribute the drug on that basis. So there's a 60% chance Anne gets it and a 40% chance Bill gets it. Most philosophers in this area, not my colleague, but most philosophers, and I think they're right, reject this. And when he put this to me in the departmental seminar, I said, no, that makes no sense. It's not a good idea to hold a lottery. Look, hold a lottery 60% of the time is going to go to Anne, that's fine, maximum payment. And then 40% of the time, and so I'm just talking in this kind of frequentist term, it's 0.4 likely that it will go to Bill. And when that happens, what's so good about that? We've got less pain relief than we could have, and what's supposed to compensate that? What's the fairness that compensates that? I mean, Anne got a 60% chance of the drug, but what good is that to Anne? If Anne's at all a normal person, She wants pain relief, not chance of a pain relief. Chance of a pain relief gets you nowhere. Chance, I mean, as I say, chances, butter no parsnips. So if the fairness just considers of equally, I mean, appropriately distributing the chances, that's not real fairness. And so you'd be better off just giving the drug to Anne. There's a little distraction here that I'll mention. Suppose that Anne and Bill are 50-50. They've got equal amounts of pain. And now there's the question, who should get the drug? In that case, there's a strong argument for spinning a coin. And some people in this area argue from continuity that the fact in that case there's a strong argument for spinning a coin, you ought to spin it also in the unequal cases. But that's silly. I mean, the argument for spinning a coin in the 50-50 case is that it demonstrates that the drug is being allocated impartially, that you aren't kind of giving it to your person you like best and so on. But that's no argument for spinning a coin, a 60-40 coin, in the unequal case, because if you give it to Anne, there's no question of it's being given to her partially. I mean, you've got a good reason for giving it to her. She's got more pain. That's the reason you're giving it to her. It's not a arbitrary wrong reason. So I say that on orthodoxy, you should give the drug to Anne. This idea that you can somehow satisfy fairness by this bogus appropriate distribution of chances is no virtue at all. That's not an argument for having a lottery. Okay, so that's where we are. But note how it's going to be different given Everett. The worry about the lottery that I had was that Bill would get the drug and Anne was somehow compensated by something that was of no worth to her at all, a mere chance that wasn't fulfilled. But on Everett, if you believe Everett, that's not going to happen. On Everett, for sure what's going to happen is that Anne will get the drug in 60% of the future and Bill will get it in 40% of the future. Now I'm talking in the classical probability terms. Okay. And so now we can treat them fairly. They are treated in proportion to relevant entitlements to the drug by holding a lottery. So if you're an Everettian, you ought to hold a lottery. If you're an orthodox person, you ought not. One objection that sometimes, well, I've had made to this line of argument is that, okay, so we've got these two futures. Bill gets the drug, Anne gets the drug, 60%, 40%. Won't Anne on this branch be able to say, look, what's happened here is that the drug has failed to maximize pain relief on this branch, and where's the fairness in that? What's been done to justify this non-maximization of pain relief? Now, that would be a reasonable complaint if we were deciding what to do, as it were, within that branch. If we were just got a once-off indivisible drug, and then it should clearly go to Anne. But that's not the choice we're looking at. What we're doing is wondering, prior to the branching, prior to whether we have branching or not, whether to give the drug to Anne or to have a lottery. And that's just like, given Everettianism, but not given orthodoxy, like asking whether Anne should get it every week for a year, or whether she should get it 6 weeks to Bill's 4. And in that case, we agreed that the mixed allocation was the right one. So in the Everettian case, we should agree before the split, are we going to have a split or not? Are we just going to give it to Anne, or are we going to have a quantum split? We've agreed that the fairest thing is to do the quantum split. The complaint we have of Anne on the 40% branch that we're thinking of is just like Anne on one of the weeks where Bill gets the drug, says, look, it's unfair. I mean, says, well, why has Bill got the drug? He needs it less than me. And that's not a reasonable thing to say if we made a choice, a commitment at the beginning of the year that we're going to split it 60-40. So you can see that the case I'm looking at isn't like Price's worry about treating his successes across some set of chancy futures fairly. That's not what we're doing. We're taking two different pre-split people, and we're talking about treating them fairly. Just ordinary two different people. We're trying to treat them fairly. And the significance of Everettianism is that it allows us to treat them fairly by having a lottery. In effect, what we're doing is we're rendering the indivisible good divisible, and then giving it to Anne and Bill in proportion to their entitlements. On orthodox view of reality, there's no way of rendering the good divisible. It's just one good. I mean, and you've got to give it to one or the other. Clearly, you should give it to Anne. But on Everettianism, so to speak, you can split the good. So I'm nearly done. So think of it like this. I mean, in the orthodox view of things, a lottery assigns the good proportionally over two possible futures. Anne gets the good, Bill gets it. They're two possible futures. But in orthodoxy, only one of those futures is actual. And what we want is to have an action that will produce the best result on the actual future. And that means giving the drug to Anne, whatever any lottery says. If we gave it to Bill because he won the lottery, her greater pain, Anne's greater pain, wouldn't be compensated by the fact it was 60% possible that she would get the drug. That's no compensation. But on an Everettian view, all these possibilities are actualities, and that should change our attitude to the lottery. The lottery is treating Anne and Bill fairly after all. It renders the indivisible good divisible and allows us to share it proportionally. So I've just been looking at this very special case, but notice it's a pretty general situation. It's going to arise whenever there's some indivisible thing to which two people have unequal claims. And on orthodoxy, it should just go to the person with the greater claim. But on Everett, we should spin a quantum coin. That seems to me a substantial difference. That's it. Thank you. Are there questions?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for a very original and different view. Yeah. You know, ethics and quantum theory. Who would have thought? But I would like only to make this note that about Hugh's objection about treating your successors fairly or not. If you have a conversation with yourself and take responsibility for whatever outcome, then your successors on whichever branch would agree that beforehand, all of them thought that they would take responsibility for whatever happens. So in a sense, if you now decide to make a good bet and it didn't work out in this branch, then you would know that you told yourself that you accept that beforehand. So, okay, that's only that. So this is not being unfair to your successors if you've talked with them beforehand.
I make a bet, and so there's a quantum bet, and there's a future in which my successor loses, another future in which my successor wins. That's not get I mean, I don't see the question of being fair to them is arising or not.
You said that Hughes says it's a problem that you have to be fair to all your successors, not only the ones with a good chance. And I said, well,
I'm not sure that Hughes' thought can be made good. I mean, if he wants all his successors to always get the same results, he can never do anything that's chancy. And that seems kind of crazy. So all he can do is kind of, in doing his calculations about whether given chancy action is the right thing to do or not, to attach more negative weight to the situation that the loser will be in. And I mean, that can make him look differently at certain bets, but I don't see it can make him change the probabilities. That seems to lead to incoherence.
Lovely talk, really enjoyed it. And just to comment, of course, if we confront risk, we are often concerned about the unlucky successors, and we take out insurance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how we manage and negotiate that, and it seems so appropriately. But no, but my question is, I suspect that your conclusion would not apply if you had divergence and uncertainty as to where you're going to end up, and so you're going to be in one branch only, and so on and so forth. I suspect so. Is that not right? Because...
So are we thinking about the
picture where there's uncertainty about where I'm going to end up in the future?
No.
That you only end up
I'm wondering, are we thinking about the Ann Bill situation, or are we thinking about the Hugh Price kind of
No,
issue?
you're the Ann Bill situation. I'm thinking that would not apply if we have this single future for each of us. There's a unique branch in which we will be continuing, so forth, and we... So you're familiar with that. So you've argued against it for years, and I foolishly argued for it for years. But I'm thinking now that what you've just done does distinguish between these two, does it not?
Yes.
Am I wrong?
Yes. So,
yeah.
well, hang on. I'm not thinking of it in terms of uncertainty. I mean,
I know.
There's such a mess about. Some people think Everettians need uncertainty. It's hard to get it. Paul thinks that they've got it trivially. Let's not put it in terms of... I just want to put it in terms of actuality.
No, absolutely.
I mean, what makes the crucial difference is that both the futures are going to be actual, not just one of them is going to be a shadow and one of them is going to be the real thing. And just think of it like, think about the year case, right? And now we have a choice, give it all to Anne, or we mix it up, right? And we think this choice is better than that. We can just do it in terms of utilities. This choice has a good amount of pain relief and fairness as well. So that's why we like this choice better than that. Now go to the once-off case, and we've got give it all to Anne. And now there's this other option, and we can spread it. And that gives us some virtue of this option that compensates for not giving it to Anne for sure, okay? But that idea that this option of having a lottery gives you fairness only applies if both the futures are actual. If only one future is actual, all that can happen is you'll possibly make the wrong decision.
There are many others who, I think we'll just have to continue it after. I haven't got it over. I'm totally with you, but what I'm thinking is contrary to your view, held over many, many years, and my view more recently, sabotage the good thing that you've got if one were to reintroduce unique features. That's the question. I suspect it is so, but perhaps we'll talk about it after.
So, so to come back, oops, sorry. To actually refer back to the first two questions, I've argued in 2 books that we can get all of this on the classical picture without the Everettian multiverse, right? The way that you cast the classical picture of decision theory is synchronic. But if we think about diachronic decisions, we make them, this goes back to, in his 1986 book, Morals by Agreement, David Gauthier argues that uncertainty about the future should lead us to be fair to ourselves across time, okay? And that fairness to ourselves across time requires fairness to others. Now, in both of my books, I cash this out in terms of uncertainty about the future, right? So the future is radically uncertain, right? It explodes exponentially in terms of possibilities. And so the idea is that a prudent person dealing with diachronic decision-making has to act under an assumption of radical uncertainty about the future, and thus be concerned with all of their possible selves, to have that kind of conversation that the first commenter is making. So what they need to do is they need to forge a cross-temporal contract with themselves that all of their possible selves can accept, right? This is a kind of prudential risk aversion. But of course, the possible selves that you can be have all kinds of interests. Some of them are self-interested, some of them have other interests as a result of empathy, result of social punishment, and so on. So by extension, even if there's no actual multiverse, right, decision-making under uncertainty requires you to act as though there is, under the expectation that any possible version of yourself matters, including the low probability ones, and you should not privilege high probabilities over low probabilities. So I think you can get all of this without the metaphysical supposition of the multiverse.
So I think, I mean, I'm going to agree with you for nearly every decision. So Everettians want to maximize expected value over all the actual features weighted by their probabilities. And non-Everettians want to do just the same thing with just the same set of futures, except they also believe in addition that only one of those futures is going to be actual. But right, in general, the decisions will come to just the same thing, and the same goes for repeated decisions. All I've argued is this is one very special kind of case where the Everettians will think something different is attractive from orthodoxy. So you would say that it makes no difference if you can argue that even on your view, it makes sense to hold a quantum lottery to decide whether Anne or Bill gets the drug. And how can you justify that in a once-off, indivisible good situation?
Because the idea is, and even in a one-off situation, we have to make the decision under uncertainty about the future.
No, it's my example, and I'll specify that we can be sure Anne gets the drug, we just give it to her, she's got it. And then there's another option, we can make it 60-40. And you can't say, I can't give it to drug because we're uncertain. I specified that we're certain. Okay.
Okay, so I'd like to, is it me? Yeah? Take up Simon's point a bit further, because I think this is very important, and it's important that we have it in public discussion, because there's a really fundamental dichotomy in Everettian theory between what David Wallace calls the conservative and radical views. The radical view is the traditional Everettian view that we split when we do quantum measurements and so on. The alternative view, which has come, Simon and David have introduced, is this overlap divergence view, and there's no question. You can't, as you recognize, David, you need multiple actualities to get what you are. I mean, I really liked what you were doing. I think it's really amusing, and it's got force to it. But we need to be clear that we're talking about the Fichten version. I mean, this is what I tried to underline at the beginning of my talk. I was talking about the Fichten version. I was setting up, and Lev always talks in terms of Fichten. But And I know, and Tim, in his criticisms sometimes of many worlds, always assumes the fission version, but there does exist this alternative conservative view that instead of splitting, we're on one of a whole multitude of different worlds, and we don't know what the future is going to be, but it's going to be something that we...
You'll have to show me. I mean, I can see the difference between the splitting view and the Lewis-like overlap view, and for what it's worth, I probably prefer this view to that one for various reasons to do with the semantics of names for people and so on. But I don't see that issue's... It's not obvious to me how that issue relates to what I was talking about.
Well, I think it relates very fundamentally, because I mean it's clear. I think I don't like the overlap view either. Yeah. I think it's clearer in the divergence view, which Simon introduced in 2010, and which Alistair Wilson has been developing in his recent book. I mean, this is, you know, he has what he calls a sort of quantum modality or quantum modal realism. And you don't, there's no splitting going on. You know, an observer, a subject, has a single future and it's unknown. And
but that's all. But in whichever kind of metaphysics you've got, you're making a decision now, and if you're an Everettian of either kind, you're making a decision that will fix it to be so and so on two different futures. I mean, so that's I mean, two different actual futures. I mean, that goes across both the Lewis view and the fission view. So, yeah.
What, so wait a minute. So no, because well,
I mean, it's a question about who's making the decision. That's a bit I don't like about the Lewis view. But still, I mean, the decision's being made jointly by these two overlapping people. That's why it's weird to think of them being overlapping. Anyway, so perhaps we should.
All right. Okay. But just before finishing, I just really like to just underline that we need to be aware of these two. And I think David was very right to call them conservative and radical, because on the conservative view, indeed, everything can look the same as with the normal sort of metaphysics. But on the radical view, we can face sort of issues exactly like the one that you've been just talking about.
Fine, good. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, very quickly, by the way, that's not what I meant by conservative versus radical. It's a philosophy of language call. It's metaphysically neutral between branching and between fission and overlap. But that's not the question. The question that here I am lying in hospital in pain. Yeah. The nurse brings in the drug. But she's going to give it to Bob next to me. Bob's in less pain. I stop and I demand an ethics review. Yeah. The hospital manager, the senior consultant, comes in and says, in a parallel universe, there's somebody extremely like you who's getting the drug, and somebody extremely like Bob who's not, and that's why Bob's getting the drug and you're not. Right. And I'm going to say, why do I care about the version of me in the parallel universe who's not in pain? I care about my pain, thanks very much. And and things would be better in the here and now if I had the drug and Bob didn't, so give it to me, please.
And I'm the doctor saying, I'm sorry, but that was all fixed a while ago. Sorry we left you off the emails, but we had to decide whether to give the drug straight to you or to hold the lottery, and we decided on the basis of these rational considerations that we really ought to hold the lottery. And you're perfectly welcome to take it up with the Ethics Review Committee, but there you are.
I'd love to come back, but that's too perfect an answer.
Thanks so much for your talk. My question is, in comparing the pain that these two people are experiencing, you have to compare their utilities, but that seems not possible. Like, you can scale up someone's utility function monotonically, and it will leave unchanged their list of preferences. So, Bob, or I forget the names of the people involved, but they could say, well, you've really got my utility function wrong. Actually, it was 100 times more severe than you thought it was, so therefore I should get the drug. Can your construction accommodate for that, or how would you?
I said, when I put down the 6-4 numbers, look, the numbers aren't going to matter. The story will work the same, whatever the numbers are. I mean, it's kind of not my problem. I mean, there are people who address these issues in real life. They have to work out some way of comparing people's entitlements, and I'm glad I don't have to deal with that myself. But whichever way you did it, you're going to face these issues, and it looks like I mean, if you've got a good way of doing it, that will give you a rationale for having a lottery of a certain kind.
Right, so you think you can do it without utility functions?
I was kind of thinking of it in terms of utility functions, but one thing I think, there's the utilities of the pains and the different people's pains and so on, and then there's the utility from the point of view of me, I'm the doctor doing decision-making, of achieving fairness. And I'm not yet arguing for incommensurability of fairness and pain utilities. I'm happy to mix them all in and do the sums like that.
Thanks.
Yeah, so let me, I just, a couple factual things. I like the talk a lot. I agree with your conclusion. When you said I was objecting to many worlds, I wasn't at that point. I was objecting to the idea that I can be a many worlds person and go about my life in the way I did before I believed in that, right? It's not, it was just saying, accepting this is a really radical revision of the way we think the world is, and it shouldn't surprise you, it would have consequences.
Yeah.
The second thing is you wondered if it had been published. It has been, I think probably in my review of David's book. I mean,
no,
exactly.
I Googled, that came up, and you
somewhere I did talk about regret and so on. Maybe it's not there, I'll find it for you. But the main thing I wanted to say is I think this issue about divergence or, you know, are you just one long space-time worm, blah, blah, I agree. I think that's not relevant here because it's only relevant if you think all these utilities have to be egocentric, and then it really matters a lot who I am in the future. But suppose I have to make this decision, I'm gonna die before this thing is carried out, right? I'm making the decision about how to distribute the drug to two other people, neither of whom is me, and I'm not gonna be anybody when this happens.
Right.
But I can go through exactly the reasoning you gave and say, well, it seems to me that the best combination of equity and overall pain relief would involve, I mean, I think what you said is absolutely right. I can now divide something that before I was a many worlds person, I thought I couldn't divide. And given that extra option, I certainly have things I might justify that I couldn't justify on the normal view that there's only going to be one future. And my egocentric place in it, maybe I know I won't be there at all. Doesn't make any difference at all to the problem you've raised.
Good, that's helpful. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, let's thank our speaker again.